In 1993, one of music's biggest stars walked onto a stage with the word "slave" written across his cheek in black marker. Prince, the musical genius behind Purple Rain and countless hits, wasn't protesting historical injustice. He was declaring war on the very company that made him a superstar. The story begins in 1992, when Warner Brothers offered Prince what seemed like the deal of a lifetime: a $100 million contract. It was one of the biggest recording deals in history, making headlines across the globe. But buried in the fine print was a golden cage that would drive one of music's most prolific artists to the edge. Prince was creating music at an unprecedented pace, recording enough material to release multiple albums per year. But Warner Brothers had other plans. The label wanted to space out his releases, claiming too much music would dilute the brand. For an artist who lived and breathed music, this was torture. "They're trying to turn me into a frozen asset," Prince told Rolling Stone in 1994. "I'm just tired of seeing my music sit on the shelf." But the real battle wasn't about release schedules. It was about ownership. Every note, every song, every master recording belonged to Warner Brothers. The more Prince created, the more he built someone else's empire. The $100 million deal wasn't freedom. It was an elaborate trap designed to control one of music's most uncontrollable forces. In an act of rebellion that shocked the industry, Prince changed his name to an unpronounceable symbol. "Since I don't own my name anymore, I'll give you another one," he declared. The media mockingly dubbed him the artist formerly known as Prince, but they missed the point. This wasn't a publicity stunt. It was a desperate attempt to separate his true identity from the one owned by Warner Brothers. The symbol-named artist began appearing in public with "slave" written on his face, releasing albums at a breakneck pace to fulfill his contract, and even deliberately creating subpar music to spite the label. He would write "slave" on his cheek for every public appearance, turning his own body into a protest sign against corporate ownership. This wasn't just about Prince anymore. His fight exposed a dark truth about the music industry. Even the biggest stars didn't truly own their art. The same contract structures that had trapped blues artists decades earlier were still alive and well, just dressed up in more zeros and legal jargon.
Like Mariah Carey just had this big $20 million, that's like a huge deal, right?
So you feeling that?
As 1993 turned into 1994, Prince's rebellion would set the stage for a decades-long fight over artists' rights that continues to this day. But he wasn't the only one preparing to risk everything to expose the industry's darkest secrets. Across the country, another group of artists was about to take on an even bigger giant, one that controlled not just the music, but the very stages it was performed on. The battle reached its boiling point when Prince began appearing at concerts with the word "slave" carved into his guitars, turning every performance into a silent protest. Radio stations were caught in the middle. They couldn't even say his name anymore. The symbol he chose wasn't just unpronounceable, it was unfaxable, unprintable, and unmarketable. And that was exactly the point. Warner Brothers watched helplessly as their superstar actively sabotaged their marketing efforts. Prince would release albums with minimal promotion, sometimes announcing them just days before release. He'd show up to interviews wearing chains, comparing his contract to indentured servitude. "If you don't own your masters," he warned other artists, "your master owns you." The industry's response was swift and brutal. Radio plays decreased, media coverage turned cynical. But Prince had anticipated this. He began selling music directly to fans through his Paisley Park hotline, pioneering what would later become the direct-to-fan model. He scrawled "free" across his face where "slave" had been when performing new, independently produced music. By 1996, Prince had fulfilled his Warner Brothers contract, but at a tremendous cost. His relationship with mainstream media was strained. His commercial success had taken a hit, and he'd spent years releasing music he wasn't proud of just to escape. Yet he emerged with something far more valuable than chart success. He was free. The aftermath of Prince's rebellion sent shockwaves through the industry. Young artists began scrutinizing their contracts more carefully. Lawyers reported an uptick in questions about master recording ownership. But most importantly, the curtain had been pulled back on the industry's most closely guarded secret, the ownership structure that turned artists into assets. But while Prince fought his battle in the spotlight, another group of musicians was discovering an even more insidious form of control. Pearl Jam, at the height of their success, had stumbled upon a monopoly that didn't just own the music, it owned every stage, every venue, and every ticket in America. And what they were about to reveal would make Prince's slave protest look like just the beginning. As Eddie Vedder and his bandmates prepared to take on Ticketmaster, they had no idea they were about to uncover a system so deeply entrenched that it would take more than 2 decades for the full impact of their fight to become clear. But unlike Prince's solo battle, Pearl Jam was about to drag the entire industry into the light, all the way to the halls of Congress. While Prince was breaking free from Warner Brothers, Pearl Jam was selling out stadiums across America. But something didn't sit right with Eddie Vedder. Night after night, he'd look out at his young fans and wonder why they were paying nearly double the band's set ticket price. The answer would lead to one of the most costly acts of courage in rock history. In 1994, Pearl Jam discovered that Ticketmaster was adding mysterious service charges, sometimes up to 100% of the ticket price. When the band demanded answers, they found themselves staring into an abyss of corporate consolidation. Ticketmaster didn't just sell tickets, they owned exclusive contracts with nearly every major venue in America. If you wanted to play an arena, you played by their rules. The band made a decision that would cost them millions. They announced they would only play venues that didn't use Ticketmaster. It seemed simple enough, until they realized just how deep the monopoly ran. Major cities became no-go zones. Entire tours had to be canceled. They were forced to piece together shows in fairgrounds, fields, and anywhere else they could find outside Ticketmaster's grip. On June 30th, 1994, Stone Gossard and Jeff Ament found themselves in an unusual venue, a congressional hearing room. Under oath, they laid bare the industry's dirty secret. A monopoly was controlling access to live music across America. "We've been led to believe that the service charges are a way to generate revenue for the venues," Gossard testified. "But we now know that Ticketmaster is paying the venues to enforce their exclusive deals." The retaliation was immediate and severe. Venue owners who had been friends for years stopped returning calls. Other bands, afraid of similar blacklisting, distanced themselves. Major promoters, tied to Ticketmaster through complex contracts, couldn't work with them. Pearl Jam, one of the biggest bands in the world, was effectively locked out of the mainstream touring industry. The band's solution was as radical as it was risky. They attempted to create an alternative touring infrastructure from scratch. They booked non-traditional venues, handled their own ticketing, and even tried to build their own distribution network. But without the established infrastructure, costs soared. Shows were plagued by logistical nightmares. The strain began to show. By 1995, the Justice Department quietly closed its investigation into Ticketmaster. No charges were filed. The monopoly remained intact. Pearl Jam had lost the battle, but they'd exposed a truth that would resonate for decades. As recently as 2023, when Taylor Swift fans faced astronomical ticket prices and system crashes, the echoes of Pearl Jam's warning could still be heard. But while Pearl Jam and Prince fought their public battles, another artist was about to take on the entire system of music distribution itself. Trent Reznor of 9 Inch Nails was watching, learning, and preparing to expose how the digital revolution was being used to create an entirely new form of artist exploitation. In 2007, while shopping in London, Trent Reznor came across his own album with a price tag that made his blood boil. 9 Inch Nails' Year Zero was selling for nearly $30, in an era when digital distribution had virtually eliminated physical production costs. The man who had written "Head Like a Hole" was about to turn his rage against the machine into a full-scale digital uprising. During a concert in Australia, Reznor grabbed the microphone between songs. "Steal it, steal away. Steal and steal and steal some more, and give it to all your friends and keep on stealing." The audience was stunned. Here was a major artist explicitly encouraging fans to pirate his music, but Reznor wasn't promoting theft. He was exposing theft on an industrial scale.
When I was here, I was doing a lot of complaining about the ridiculous prices of CDs down here.
Speaking of stealing, unlike these record labels, I'm not going to rob you of anything. In fact, I'm giving away all this content for free. The only thing I'll ask you to do is hit that subscribe button if you like our content. And unlike those service charges, this one actually goes to support independent creation. Universal Music Group, his label at the time, was charging premium prices for digital albums while paying artists pennies on the dollar. Reznor took unprecedented action. He released The Slip completely free online with a simple message: "This one's on me." The album was downloaded 1.4 million times in its first week. But the real revolution was in the details. He released all the master tracks, encouraging fans to remix and recreate his music. It was a direct attack on the concept of corporate ownership that had trapped Prince years earlier. The industry's response revealed just how threatened they felt. Radio stations were pressured to reduce Nine Inch Nails' airplay. Media coverage turned hostile, painting Reznor as anti-business rather than pro-artist. But unlike his predecessors, Reznor had built a direct connection with his audience through early adoption of internet platforms. Through his website, Reznor exposed the industry's digital pricing schemes in detail. He showed how a $9.99 digital album generated more profit than a $16.99 CD, yet artists were still paid based on physical sales models. He revealed how labels were double-dipping, charging consumers full price while paying artists reduced digital rates. The breaking point came when Reznor discovered Universal was using Nine Inch Nails music in digital bundles without additional compensation. In 2007, he declared independence. As of right now, Nine Inch Nails is a totally free agent, free of any recording contract with any label. I have been under recording contracts for 18 years and have watched the business radically mutate from one thing to something inherently very different. His next move would change the industry forever. Reznor released Ghost's I-4 under a Creative Commons license, offering everything from a free download to a $300 Ultra Deluxe edition. Without label support, it generated $1.6 million in its first week. The message was clear. Artists didn't need the old system anymore. But while these individual battles were being fought, a larger war was brewing. The very structure of the music industry, the complex web of contracts, licenses, and agreements that had trapped generations of artists, was about to face its biggest challenge yet. And this time, it wasn't just one artist or band leading the charge. Behind these individual acts of rebellion lay a darker truth, a carefully constructed system designed to keep artists dependent on corporate structures. The battles fought by Prince, Pearl Jam, and Trent Reznor weren't isolated incidents. They were different threads of the same tapestry of control. The system worked like a three-sided cage. First, labels owned the masters, the original recordings that generated all future income. Second, distributors like Ticketmaster controlled access to audiences. Third, radio conglomerates decided what music reached the public's ears. Each piece reinforced the others, creating a nearly inescapable web. Artists who dared to speak out faced a coordinated response. When Metallica challenged the system in 2000 over Napster, they weren't just fighting piracy, they were questioning who had the right to control music distribution. The industry turned their valid concerns about artist compensation into a public relations disaster, painting them as greedy rock stars fighting against fan interests. The numbers told the real story. A hit album selling for $16.99 in stores would typically earn an artist just $1.50. A $100 concert ticket would generate as little as $12 for the performing band, with the rest disappearing into a maze of fees, charges, and middleman costs. Even successful artists often found themselves in debt to their labels, trapped in a system of creative accounting that would make Wall Street blush.
I don't know. I'm all for convenience in the technology moving forward. Getting music out to people is the important part, but just make sure the artist...
Dixie Chicks, now the Chicks, saw their career nearly destroyed in 2003 after speaking out politically. Their music disappeared from radio stations owned by Clear Channel, now iHeartMedia, which controlled over 1,200 stations nationwide. The message was clear: step out of line, and you'll be erased. The system's genius was in its invisibility to consumers. Fans blamed artists for high ticket prices, never knowing about Ticketmaster's venue monopoly. They questioned artists' integrity when albums were delayed, unaware of labels' strategic release schedules. The industry had created a perfect shield, deflecting criticism onto the very artists it was exploiting. Behind closed doors, even bigger artists were trapped. Bruce Springsteen fought quietly for years against ticket scalping, only to have Ticketmaster's dynamic pricing system charge up to $5,000 for his 2023 tour tickets, a battle he ultimately lost. Taylor Swift's master recordings were sold without her knowledge, forcing her to re-record her entire catalog to regain control. But as the digital age progressed, cracks began to appear in the foundation. Social media gave artists direct access to fans. Streaming, despite its own problems, weakened the label's distribution monopoly. Independent platforms emerged, offering alternatives to the traditional system. A new generation of artists was watching, learning, and preparing to break free entirely. When Chance the Rapper won a Grammy in 2017, he didn't just make history as the first streaming-only artist to win, he shattered the industry's fundamental myth that artists needed the system to succeed. Standing on that stage, he represented something the old guard feared most: proof that the emperor had no clothes. But the real revolution was happening behind the scenes. In 2020, Kanye West did something unprecedented. He tweeted out his entire Universal Music contract page by page. "I need every lawyer in the world to look at these," he wrote. The contracts revealed what artists had long suspected: a labyrinth of legal clauses designed to maintain control while appearing to offer freedom. Taylor Swift's battle for her masters became a watershed moment. When her catalog was sold without her knowledge, she didn't just protest, she acted. Her decision to re-record her entire discography as Taylor's version transformed a corporate power play into a cultural movement. Fans actively chose to stream her new versions, turning what could have been a business disaster into a triumph of artist empowerment. The streaming era brought its own challenges, but also new opportunities. Artists like Frank Ocean played the system at its own game, fulfilling his contract with Endless, a visual album released exclusively on Apple Music, then releasing Blonde independently just days later. The move cost his former label millions and became a blueprint for artistic independence. Social media and direct-to-fan platforms changed the power dynamic fundamentally. When Radiohead released In Rainbows with a pay-what-you-want model, they weren't just experimenting with pricing. They were demonstrating that artists could bypass the entire traditional distribution system. The album made more money from digital sales than their previous album's total revenue. The live music industry began to crack too. When the pandemic forced concerts online, artists discovered they could reach global audiences without traditional venues. Platforms like Bandcamp Friday emerged, where 100% of sales went directly to artists. The myth of needing corporate infrastructure was crumbling. Independent success stories multiplied. Artists like Tech N9 built multi-million-dollar enterprises without major label support. Wolfpack funded tours by gaming Spotify's system with their Sleepify album. Amanda Palmer raised $1.2 million on Kickstarter, proving fan funding could replace label advances. But perhaps most significantly, the new generation of artists approached the industry with open eyes. They saw how their predecessors had been trapped and chose different paths. Artists like Tyler, the creator, built media empires beyond music. Others like Run the Jewels gave their music away free while building sustainable businesses through merchandising and live shows. The giants haven't fallen. Ticketmaster still controls most live venues. Major labels still dominate the charts, and streaming platforms still pay fractions of pennies per play. But their power is no longer absolute. The sacrifices made by Prince, Pearl Jam, Trent Reznor, and countless others created cracks in the foundation that have become pathways to freedom. Today's artists have choices their predecessors could only dream of. They can build careers outside the system, choose to use parts of it selectively, or challenge it directly with unprecedented support from fans who finally understand the true cost of corporate control over art. As concert tickets hit record prices in 2025, and streaming services continue to pay artists fractions of pennies, it might seem like nothing has changed. But that would ignore the real victory. The truth is finally out in the open, and with it comes the power to choose a different future. When Prince wrote Slave on his face, when Pearl Jam testified before Congress, when Trent Reznor told fans to steal his music, they were pulling back the curtain on a system that had operated in shadows for generations. Each act of rebellion came with a devastating personal cost, but together they illuminated a path forward. Today, when you see artists like Bad Bunny selling out stadiums without singing in English, or indie artists building million-dollar careers through Patreon, you're watching the fruits of those earlier battles. The system hasn't disappeared, but its power to control artists' destinies has diminished with every new alternative path to success. The next time you see a headline about astronomical ticket prices or streaming revenue disputes, remember, these aren't just business stories. They're the continuing echoes of a fight that began when one artist dared to call himself a slave, when a band from Seattle refused to accept monopoly control, when an industrial rock icon told fans to steal his music rather than feed a broken system. But perhaps the most important lesson isn't about the music industry at all. It's about the price of truth and the power of collective awareness. These artists showed us that systems of control rely on silence and acceptance to maintain their power. They proved that even the most entrenched industries can be forced to change when enough people understand the truth and demand better. As you stream your next album or buy your next concert ticket, remember, you're not just a consumer, you're a participant in this ongoing revolution. Every time you choose to support an independent artist, buy directly from a musician's website, or question excessive fees, you're continuing the fight these pioneers began. The future of music isn't in the hands of corporations anymore. It's in our hands, artists and fans together, building a new system that serves art rather than controlling it. After all, as Prince wrote in his song Pope, "You can't make me real, 'cause I'm not yours to feel." In the end, that's what all these battles were about. The right to be real, to be free, and to create art on one's own terms. The question now isn't whether the system will change, but how quickly we'll build something better to replace it.